In 2009, National Geographic magazine photographers shot over 1 million images. But only 1,000 could be published. And now we're counting down the 10 best pictures of the year. National Geographic photographers venture into the unknown, capturing pictures that tell incredible stories.
Fire!
A veteran photographer, Chris Johns is National Geographic magazine's editor-in-chief.
To me, one of the most intriguing things about this picture, the pictures that are the most powerful are the pictures that connect to us personally. I picked 10 pictures that I feel a deep connection with. And that's the true power of National Geographic magazine, is connecting with people and helping people empathize and understand the incredible world we live in.
Number 10, The Assignment, Amazon River Dolphins.
In the red tannic waters of the Amazon River, there's a mysterious creature that's seldom been photographed, the Amazon River dolphin.
On his first assignment for the magazine, Kevin Schaefer swims the Amazon River to photograph unusual pink dolphins who've adapted to this unique freshwater environment.
One of the things that really excited me about this project was nobody had really worked extensively with Amazon dolphins before. So it was a very eerie and quiet experience. Particularly eerie and quiet when you can't see anything and suddenly these spirits come appearing out of the gloom. It was really quite an amazing experience. One of the great challenges of this project was shooting underwater in the Amazon. Most of the Amazon is almost completely opaque. In fact, parts of it, you probably couldn't see your hand in front of your face. Visibility there is measured in inches, not in feet. So there were times when I could only see basically 3 feet in front of me. So I had to be pretty close to these dolphins to get pictures of them. I was shooting within 6 to 8 inches using very wide-angle lenses, even fisheye lenses. And that allowed me to get both, you know, a picture of something that I couldn't see if it was more than 6 feet away, but also gave an intimacy, I think, to the picture. They were really right in my face. In fact, one of them was so in my face that he, not out of aggression, but just out of playfulness, kicked my camera housing and shattered my housing and flooded my camera and put me out of action for a while. I was so haunted, in fact, by this need to get the defining picture of the dolphins and their environment that I sort of sweated bullets. The whole time I was down there thinking, how am I going to get this? You never know when you go out on a project like this what you're going to come back with. But you have to aim high. You've got to, you know, have a number of things you want to get, and you rely on local expertise, on scientific knowledge, researchers working with these animals on a regular basis to kind of help you, guide you towards getting a variety of pictures. I tried lots of things. We built platforms in trees. I would get up on top of that and shoot straight down. And then every time they passed underneath me, I could get actually a pretty good shot from above the water because the water was so still, it was like glass. One memorable day, a mother and her baby came swimming over the tops of some submerged trees and allowed me to get a couple of pictures, one of which ended up in the story. In the water, down below me, I couldn't see anything. So my only solution then was to get underneath them. So I tried to come up with a solution to get down underneath the dolphins, get them silhouetted against the sun. Or to show the forest above the water, which was something that I thought I might be able to get. So I came up with a really kind of ridiculous scheme where I took a big chunk of scrap metal, tied a rope to it, and dropped it to the bottom of the river, then tied a float at the top. And I would, with my mask and snorkel, take a big gulp of air and pull myself down about 8 to 10 feet underwater, and then hang onto the rope with one leg and one arm and shoot straight up. So I was able to actually silhouette the animals against the, you know, the overhead tropical sun in this water that's just, you know, the color of, I don't know, tomato juice, bright red. It just almost looks unnatural.
The Amazon River dolphin story is one of my favorites because it surprised me. I had heard of these creatures, but to actually see them and share them with our readers in the magazine gives us all a great deal of excitement.
The main reason I thought this story was important was just people know so little about these animals. I mean, most people I've showed the pictures to or told the story of have said, I didn't know there was such a thing as an Amazon river dolphin, a freshwater dolphin living in the Amazon. How is that possible? I think what it does and why this picture appeals to people is because it's that sense of intimacy. You sort of feel like these animals are just right there in front of you. You could almost go out and poke their belly button. They're that close.
I chose this image because I feel like I'm really meeting a creature. And there's that connection, face to face, eye to eye, that is so appealing and makes me drawn into the creature's life and drawn into the magnificent habitat, the Amazon basin, where these Amazon dolphins live.
Number 9, The Assignment. Rapid development in Western China.
I think for me, especially, and probably for most photographers, you know, the moment that you're in the field creating the photograph is the most memorable.
Fritz Hoffman's photograph of a man crossing the New River, pulling his cow, blew my mind. I thought, you have got to be kidding.
Hoffman treks through Western China on a 9-week assignment, exploring where tradition and the modern world intersect.
The story was about the 3 parallel rivers area in far western China, where 3 of Asia's greatest and most important rivers pass through on their way to other countries in Southeast Asia. I look forward to this story because it brought me into an environment that I'm not usually working in, but I'm still focusing on people. It's very rich biodiversity, and culturally there are 15 different ethnic minority groups living there. So the idea of the story was to go there and try to document the qualities of that before it changes, really.
As the 3 parallel rivers rage, cutting gorges twice the size of the Grand Canyon in places, the people who live on the mountaintop villages make use of an age-old way of traveling.
So every day on market day, each week, people would come across this zip line to get to market and buy or sell vegetables and their different animals.
It's on one of these zip lines that Hoffman captures one of the best photographs of 2009.
Oftentimes when I'm in the field, I lie awake at night just thinking about how I could do an image, how I could do a picture, and this was one of those situations. My idea was to photograph people coming across from the center of the river, and so I had borrowed a harness and a pulley. There are 2 cables at each crossing, and I got myself out in the middle of one of the cables and hung there to photograph people coming across on the other one. And it was a perfect situation because as the cable leveled out, people would stop, their momentum would stop, and they'd have to kind of reach over on their back and go hand over hand. And we were just about to wrap it up. And I thought, okay, I got the picture, I've shot that. And across the river in the distance, up on the top of the mountain, we could see these villagers coming down with a cow. My assistants, they were ecstatic, and we were just like, you know, please cross the river, please cross the river. And one of the villagers came across on the zip line. The other one pushed the cow, gave him a big push, and then when he got to the middle, he just stopped there. So the cow's hanging there, flailing away. And the other villager went out, and then he's pulling with his feet. He's got his feet wrapped around that pole, and he's pulling hand over hand, pulling this cow across. As he got close enough where I could get close in with a wider lens, you know, I just got in there and you know, got him coming across so I could get that, you know, intimate, you know, emotional detail. As soon as I shot the picture, I turned to my driver, and I turned to him and said, that's going to be in the magazine. The camera gives you a segue into someone's life, which I think is very fascinating, and I appreciate that opportunity. I think the most moving thing was being there and photographing that, was just seeing how these ancient cultures are alive today. Their reverence for the land and how they relate to the land and the environment. It made me think a lot about my own connection to the earth, and especially in some of these outlying areas where you have these pilgrims that are walking, you know, doing these incredible treks with just a burlap sack. But But the thing that really struck me was how the people there have lived pretty much hand in hand with the environment for many years. And crossing the river is an example how it's a simple cable crossing that works, and they're living with it for years and years.
Number 8, the assignment: severe drought in southeastern Australia.
I didn't think that I was going to be a photographer in college. I really loved photography, but it wasn't something that I thought I would have a career at.
Over 10 years ago, Amy Tunsing landed an internship with National Geographic. Editors at the magazine saw raw talent and gave her a shooting assignment, when most interns weren't taking pictures.
I feel like I've grown up with Geographic. I've really established myself as a photographer and my style and who I am, and it's been a really wonderful 10 years.
Tunsing journeys along the Murray-Darling River Basin in Australia to document the impact of a 7-year drought.
This wasn't a story just about drought. It actually was also about management of a river system. And one of the main reasons that Geographic wanted to do this story is that there's so many places in the world right now that are having to deal with river management. And if we could shine a light on Australia and look at it, then maybe it would help the other places in the world.
Tunsing's job: to capture photos of the parched landscape and the farmers whose water allotment from the state has continued to shrink, threatening their livelihood. Recent rain offers a sign of hope, so Tunsing and the Booth family drive to check on the grazing fields for the family's cattle.
It was very bittersweet because they were very happy about the rain they had gotten, but it was such a heavy downpour and it was mixed with hail that it had actually destroyed any little bit of vegetation that had grown.
From the truck window, she sees a composition coming together.
His 2 kids were with him, and we were just talking about the land, and I looked up and I saw this whole scene starting to happen. A lot of times these things are sort of like a dance, and you start to sort of predict maybe what's going to happen. I liked the way that the door framed the moonscape, because when I was outside, you kind of got lost in it. Like there was nothing to hold you in because it was so vast and it was so dry looking, and it did look like such a moonscape that there was nothing to sort of highlight it or contain it. It just looked big. And so suddenly, when it got framed in by the car door, it made some sense. I just started shooting it, and then all of a sudden that one happened. Sand was blowing around, and so she was just pushing her hair back. She was doing that often throughout that venture that we went on. And that was it. And that was really the only frame that really worked. The rest of the frames were interesting, but that was the one that really, really worked.
This picture is very close to photographic perfection. Yet, it's not just a photograph for the sake of photography. It tells the story of a parched landscape, the attentiveness of a father, the harshness of the weather, the little girl with her hands on her face. This picture is extraordinary. This picture is a classic example of photojournalism that crosses the line from journalism into the realm of art.
Number 7, the assignment: underground caves in southeastern United States.
I live where I grew up, which is the Cumberland Plateau of Tennessee, and the area is full of caves. So as a young man, my friends and I would tromp around in the woods and find caves and go into them because it was the most incredible, adventurous thing you could do. You could go somewhere no one's ever been before. What a great thing. And for some reason, I kept doing it.
This assignment takes them to the underground system known as TAG, where caves lie beneath Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia in the U.S.
with sandstone. Water comes off that sandstone and hits limestone layers below it. And what we do as cavers is we walk these layers of harder rock that create these big benches here. And what we're looking for is a place where water comes through this hard rock and hits a softer layer of limestone below. And this is where we find the big caves. Autograph time?
Preparing to explore caves in Tennessee, a crew of 8 cavers pack the tools Alvarez will need to splash light on the underworld.
I'm drawn to these stories by that sense of wonder and exploration that you find underground, of going somewhere that no one's ever been before. And as a photographer, going there and being able to make a photograph of it and bring it back to the rest of the world. Most of us can't go to these places. Either they're too hard to get to or we don't have time. No one likes to go through tight squeezes to get to something beautiful. Most caves are not very big. And when you're in them, you have a real feeling, sort of a feeling of claustrophobia, because you're in the darkness and maybe you're squeezing through a little passage and it's very scary. But I can go there as a photographer and make an image and bring that back. And that's the most incredible gift to me, is that I can communicate the beauty of the underground world to people who can't go there.
Our cameras are rolling on the exact moment Alvarez captures this top 10 photo.
Stephen Alvarez takes his camera and his life into places I don't want to go. Look at this photograph. You've got this caver, can barely get his nose and mouth out of the water. I don't want to be there. And this is unusual because so often I'll see a picture in National Geographic magazine and I'll think, boy, I wish I was there. I wish I could be there. But I look at this picture and I think, thank goodness I don't have to go there and do that. And Stephen has brought technical skills and expertise to it like no one who's been in caves before.
It requires going back to the early days of photography and think about, well, how did people light things when they didn't have electronic flashes? Oh, they'd use magnesium filaments or they'd use flash powders. Well, I could go back to the early days and take this technology and carry it forward and use the most expensive digital camera made, but also a lighting technique from the 1880s. The best moment is right before the flash powder goes off. Everyone's lights are off, and we're all standing there in complete blackness. And I open the cameras up, and I'm using 2 cameras to make sure I get the frame. I'll go on over there. I'm going to have Luke fire up this light so I can frame the picture. Paul, would you go down to your flash position, please?
You want me down to the ledge?
Yeah, go down to the ledge and bring the hot light with you as well. And I open them up and I say fire, and there's this explosion.
Fire!
It's loud, it's very, very visceral. You can feel it in your chest. It's a great kind of photography, because usually you make a picture and it's just a little click, but this time we make a picture and it's wham! Everyone breaks out in applause.
I chose this photograph. This is the one that says courage, risk, intensity, and this thirst to explore. A National Geographic photographer is a person with an intense curiosity, who exhibits a high degree of patience, who's persistent, who is never quite satisfied, never quite willing to turn away and say, I've got it.
Number 6, the assignment, the changing face of Islam in Indonesia.
Jim Noctway came to us with an idea. He wanted to go to Indonesia and photograph a country that is the largest Muslim population of any nation in the world.
Through most of my career, I've concentrated on conflicts and critical social issues. It's taken me to many wars all over the world, beginning in 1981, virtually every continent, many, many wars in contemporary history.
His photography covers not only war, but worldwide social conflict, which is what he explores in Indonesia.
So it's a kind of sleeping giant. It's traditionally been a very tolerant society. It has accepted secular practices, has accepted other religions and other cultures. And in recent years, there's been a strain of fundamentalism that's come into Indonesia and even radicalism and violence. So it's very important to understand what Indonesia really is. And I think in doing this story, we were trying to enlighten people about the unique nature of Indonesia. It is a very powerful geographic and demographic force in Southeast Asia.
We have no political agenda. We want to be the place you come for trusted information that will help cut away the bureaucracy and agendas and all the things that can happen to us when we're trying to get to the bottom of something.
Naktwe's story covers the many faces of Islam here, but his top 10 image depicts devout Muslims who do not condone violence.
Jim Naktwe's picture from Indonesia is haunting. It's mysterious, yet the form is beautiful.
On Sulawesi, at a commune called An Nadzir, Naktwe finds a very devout approach to Islam.
This is at the feast of Eid al-Adha, which is the day of sacrifice. I made this picture on the borderline between childhood and womanhood. The women are all covered in full chador. The child is still uncovered except for her head. You can see her face, you can see her identity, her personality. She's got a kind of innocence and playfulness to her. You can see her moving her arms almost as if she's flying. And what she faces in her future is what we see behind her.
This is another one of those photographs that goes from powerful photojournalism to art. This is a photograph that connects me, even though there's this mystery of who those people are behind the veil, connects me with my fellow man.
As a journalist, my goal is always to create awareness and understanding. Because Indonesia is such a large force in the world, I think there are, a lot of people in this world who put their life at risk for something they believe in. The higher cause of journalism is to serve humanity. The change cannot happen until we identify what's wrong. I believe journalism is a service industry, and the service we provide is awareness.
Number 5, the assignment. Green rooftops around the world.
The green roof story and the photographs that are in it are about aesthetics. It's saving energy. It's being green and being beautiful at the same time. Diane Cook and Len Jensel are by nature very curious people.
While scouting and shooting on building tops to show a new trend in building green, Jen Shaw and Cook travel to 20 cities, sometimes both shooting at once.
Isn't that beautiful?
It depends on the story. Sometimes we're both behind the camera talking about a frame because we have the camera on a tripod. Or, if we're working in a helicopter, at $900 an hour, we're both going to be shooting at the same time, so we get, twice as much accomplished during that time.
And half the time we don't even remember who took what picture.
The top 10 photo of a green roof may look like a simple shot, but it isn't easy to get.
Well, when people, look at a finished picture, they never really know how much work went into it because everybody thinks, all you have to do is push a button.
We climbed so many precarious ladders to get up to these roofs that with, photo equipment and backpacks dangling from us.
Definitely not an assignment for somebody who's suffering from vertigo.
Absolutely.
Jen Shaw and Cook spend 2 days searching for the best angle to shoot Chicago's City Hall roof garden. They decide on the 25th floor of an adjacent building.
The sky was getting really, really black in the distance, and we knew that we could set up and wait for that magic moment we were waiting for at dusk, and then we wouldn't be able to shoot it.
The threatening storm is not their only challenge.
We made a decision to shoot through the office window. It's almost a photographic tableau where you never ever want to shoot through a window. And we had no choice, you know. We brought our own black tape and our own black cloth, and we covered everything in the office as dusk fell and tried to get rid of all the reflections. And we went from dusk to almost nighttime, and then the skies opened up and we couldn't even get back to our hotel, which is only 3 blocks away. It was raining so hard. So we were very lucky. There's a lot of luck and serendipity in all of this.
Here we have a picture that is a complete mind blower to me. You've got Chicago, hardly known as the greenest city in the world, with a city hall that's got a garden on top of it.
Chicago's mayor approved the installation of a green roof on City Hall as part of his initiative to make Chicago the greenest city in the U.S.
There's so many benefits to planting a roof. We can have a positive effect on the environment. And to me, that was a message I really wanted to get across in the story.
Number 4, the assignment. The Hadza tribe of Tanzania. New York City studio photographer Martin Scholler trades the city streets for Tanzanian grasslands to photograph one of the oldest hunter-gatherer tribes in the world, the Hadza.
I went to Africa with the idea of doing the same thing that I would normally do in the United States, in the sense that I would bring all these lights, try to take these beautiful portraits that go beyond the normal realm of just showing up with a camera and taking some snapshots. The biggest obstacle is always photographing people that you can't communicate well with, is to make them seem relaxed and at ease with the situations, that they're being themselves rather than being the afraid-looking tribal member. You know, this story is important, not that any existing tribe today really lives like we all have lived 15,000 years ago. 15,000 years ago, there were only hunter-gatherer people, and it's nice to have a record to show how these people lived before they all vanished.
Magazine photo editor Todd James works closely with Scholler on this story, his first for the magazine.
So I work with photographers on a story, and I try and help them shape that story. It's like a text editor. It's just a sort of a different language. It's a visual language. Basically, this is where everything comes together. It starts to take form. The writer is working with their text editor, the photographer is working with me as a photo editor, and layout is sort of waiting for this to come to their end of the hall, and this is where that happens. When we get into the layout process, you know, you start to see the story take form. It starts to resemble what the reader is finally going to see. A lot of other magazines may send somebody into the field for a week or two, but they'll just run like 3 or 4 pictures on a topic. There won't be any real consideration about whether that really covers the topic. We devote more resources, more time, more money, more pages to photography than pretty much any magazine in the world. And to have those kind of resources is really a sort of a great advantage.
The magazine sought a fresh perspective from Scholler.
His influences as a photographer were different than many of the photographers who work here. Most of the photographers who shoot for us come out of a newspaper tradition of photojournalism and a certain kind of formula or way of thinking about individual pictures and about the way the pictures go together. For me, there's a very, very sort of direct, wide-eyed curiosity. I mean, he's one of the most curious people I've ever met. That's sort of an essential element to me in terms of science, in terms of photojournalism, in terms of so many things.
He photographs 112 tribe members. The young boy Niga, in particular, attracts Chris John's attention.
This one was special to me because of the innocence on the face, the little details that you see in a Martin Scholler photograph of a bit of sand here and there in the face.
I like the portrait because he has this, this pride in his eyes. He looks kind of strong. He was kind of my favorite kid because he wasn't as playful. He was more standoffish, and he seemed a little bit smarter, a little bit more investigative. I wanted to make these portraits that feel a little bit more personal, more intimate, to capture an intimate moment where the people is rather being themselves and laughing. So I like a lot of the pictures I've taken of these people that have a different energy to them, where they're just having a good time dancing or talking to each other, being in a good mood. That shows that they're just like us.
But the Hads are very, very peaceful, very passive, very flexible people. They're not aggressive people, and they keep getting pushed around into a smaller and smaller place on the planet.
So they know what the outside world looks like, what it means to live in the city. They just decided that they want to keep on living the way their ancestors have lived, for the most part. An average Hadza has a bow and arrow, a knife, maybe a blanket or two, a couple t-shirts. What I've learned from them is basically the obvious thing, that you don't need a lot of things to be happy.
Once the photographers come back, I get to participate in probably the most rewarding part of my job. I get to see the photographs. We go into a room, and then the lights go down, and we're transported to that place, those people, those experiences that photographer had.
Number 3, the assignment, a global food crisis.
When we sent John Stanmeyer out to talk about the global food situation and the issues that surround it, I never would have expected that John could come back with a picture like this. This photograph is complex, and there's an immediate emotional connection with the people in the photograph. It's a very sophisticated picture.
I could sense at the time that something fairly monumental was happening. The government subsidizes bread because a very large percentage of the population of Egypt lives in poverty. I wasn't quite aware of how deeply rooted poverty was in Egypt until I went there. I'd never been to Egypt before. I was inside the bread kiosk in this little metal box that was probably 1.5 meters by 1.5 meters. It was extremely loud, especially because it was a metal tinned aluminum box.
Stanmeyer often records audio of places he photographs, and does so in Cairo.
And I remember just setting the recorder up for maybe 10 minutes, just letting it run. And there was just 2 little narrow windows with a spine going through it. So it was sort of this, stereo vision of things going through each divide of the frame, and sort of waiting for that human symphony to play out. A lot of people weren't actually happy that I was there because they viewed it as being something negative on their culture, and I would explain to them, that I'm not trying to look at the negatives of your culture. I'm trying to look at the realities of our collective human existence.
Over the last 4 years, food prices have risen around the globe, pushing 75 million people into poverty. To document the devastating effects of shrinking food stockpiles, Stanmeyer travels to 9 countries.
A story like this is heavily researched and heavily documented on a very wide level. It's brutal to have to let pictures go because you only have so much space to fit in the magazine. I think total was nearly 30,000 images. I don't know what actually ran in the magazine, but I think maybe 15 to 18 photographs.
John takes an incredible set of photographs. Astonishing. At the end of it, he turns to me and says, I have a little more time left on my budget. I haven't got it yet. This is okay. I know I can do better. I need to go back. He just absolutely will not stop until he believes he has it absolutely right.
The challenge was to try to present to the readers the magnitude of what it is for a vast percentage of our human population, the struggle to feed themselves, so that the consciousness is tapped, so that we're aware that we may have plenty where we are, but in vast areas of our planet, there isn't that much plenty. The question becomes, can you continue to act as though what is happening over there, whether it's across a body of water or across a mountain range or across an invisible line that humans create in dirt, say that it doesn't affect me because I'm living over here.
Number 2, the assignment. Life on the Kamchatka Peninsula. Since he was a child, Randy Olson has been drawn to taking pictures.
I think I became interested in photography when I realized how interested my father was in it. So as a young child, I was always very proud that my father was a photographer.
And 4 decades later, Olson's love of the outdoors and photography blends into an assignment in Kamchatka, Russia. This remote corner of the world nurtures one of the most productive salmon runs on Earth.
Getting around Kamchatka is difficult because it's about the size of California, but it only has 130 kilometers of roads. So to get to the areas that I needed to get to involved either Mi-8 helicopters, or there were a couple of commercial flights up into the higher reaches of Kamchatka. So, I mean, those are your options. So travel is difficult. The area that the photograph of the brown bear came from was a 2-hour flight by Mi-8, which is, you know, the size of this room, and then a 2-hour flight back. It's $3,000 an hour, you know, something like that. So these are expensive, remote places to get to. Except for Kamchatka and Bristol Bay, Alaska, salmon production in the entire Pacific Rim has dwindled to 3 to 4% of historic production.
This figure includes both wild and farm-raised salmon, but still represents an alarming decline. To understand the relationship between the dozens of species dependent on salmon and the importance of Kamchatka, Olson photographs both people and wildlife. This includes Kamchatka's massive brown bears.
This is also the place where a photographer who's done work for National Geographic was eaten completely. And he was warned that there was a rogue bear. They're actually not very good fishermen. You see why they need to have this abundance of salmon because they run and they try and step on one. That's their fishing plan, is to come charging in and hope they feel a fish under their foot.
To capture underwater shots of the salmon, Olson rigs a camera with a remote connection to his laptop.
I took the underwater camera for the fish and I moved it over to a spot where I felt this one grizzly bear felt that it was the best spot to fish. To make a photograph, that bear had to charge up to within 6 feet of me, which can be a little disconcerting. Even though you know they're not looking at you as a food source, when they're charging up and they're that big, it's still a little scary. So I've got a camera underwater and I can see the fish on the screen, but I've got grizzly bears attacking each other 15 feet away that I'm photographing with a 600-millimeter lens.
I don't know that I would want to be this close to a brown bear in Kamchatka, even though he is fishing. Randy made this picture because he's a seasoned veteran photographer, and he's taking these photographs of a bear in a way I've never seen a brown bear before.
That bear came up to that camera one time during that week, and I got 2 frames, one of which is the one that ran in the magazine.
Both frames are fascinating photos, but the editors choose to publish only one.
The first frame was the bear looking around and almost feeling around for fish. So it's the paw coming very close to the camera, but then the head is up above the water. When you see that paw underwater, the bear is looking right at me, you know, from just a few feet away. The second frame was after it stuck its head in the water, looking around to see if it could see any fish, and when it didn't, it moved off.
This picture will probably even go so far as to stand the test of time. It's that interesting. It's that provocative. It's that original. Here's this great story in front of me. Where's the lead picture? Where are the narrative threads? Is everything here? Will a photographer go back? I mean, it's not unusual for a photographer who may have to go back. Nick spent a year in the Redwoods. He spent a year dreaming and imagining a photograph.
We don't know if we're going to succeed. What I do know is we're going to make a photograph. I don't think we'll stop until we get it right.
Number 1, the assignment, the world's tallest trees.
Nick Nichols' photograph of a redwood tree, top to bottom. This just may be my favorite photograph of the year.
I've worked in forests for my whole life, and I just never could photograph a tree properly.
Nick Nichols has been making pictures for National Geographic magazine for more than 20 years. His most recent assignment, to photograph California's giant redwoods.
I don't know why it's so hard to make a beautiful picture of a tree. Maybe it's because we see them, but the truth is you don't see a tree. When you stand at the bottom of our tree, you see about the bottom 16th of it. You could walk by this tree 1,000,000 times and never think it's a spectacular tree. But I've got to pull away from it and find a way for you to see it. Steve Sillett and these guys have to shoot a crossbow up. They climb up the tree, and then they shoot another crossbow over to another tree and put a line across. Now you're going to drop a line down the middle. So now you're out in open space. You have a line that's in the open space. And I climbed up the rope and looked and said, now you can see this tree. We have the unobstructed view, but now we've got our camera spinning in space. And a still camera has to be stationary. I just painted myself into a corner. And finally, I got trapped in my own tree where I couldn't even see the tree that I was looking at. We finally figured out if we raised this camera up into the air on this line, you could see the tree all the way.
So we came up with the idea of putting 3 35mm cameras together to create a panoramic that we would shoot in layers.
Oh yeah. We're building a tree out of 90 photographs. First we had to get everything to work.
I see the biggest challenge is actually creating something that looks good in the heart of the tree by the main trunk. It may not be doable, but we're going to try. The robotic camera system is going to be probably about 50 feet away from the tree.
I get on the computer and see if it's talking to the cameras. Then we run it up the tree to the top.
Exposure, see? Sweet.
Yeah. We actually shot 3 photographs at a time, lowered the camera 3 meters, shot another 3 frames, lowered the camera again, shot another 3 frames, and so on. We would take bracketed exposures all the way down. In the end, we ended up with 84 images.
I feel like that this photograph that we made is going to end up standing for far more than trees, because we got these humans standing in the tree. We're going to feel like this has something to do with our relationship to the planet at this critical time. I mean, that tree's been standing for 1,600 years. How many of me and you have come and gone in that time? The advice I would give someone starting is to pick a subject and to be passionate about it and to, in a sense, own that subject. Take a subject and immerse yourself in it with all the passion you can possibly have.
I think the simplest thing that anyone could do to improve a photograph is to simplify it. Look behind your subject. Think about what else is there besides whatever it is that drew your attention in the first place.
You take inventory and you subtract or add information by moving your body, composing things. Really think about that.
Honor your subjects, get to know them, be present with them, care about who they are. The pictures will follow.
This is a completely unknown realm. To know what's in a cave, you actually have to go there, and that sense of original exploration is what motivates people to go underground and to explore some of these places.
My overall advice would be to stay loose, concentrate, and don't forget to breathe.
It teaches me so much about my world, but it also teaches me so much about myself. It's a window looking into the world, but it's also a mirror shining right back into who I am.
It's nice to have a record to show how these people lived before they all vanished into modern civilization or into, losing their way of life.
Try whenever you can to take the sense of I out of yourself, out of your photography, and look at it more as we, as us, because again, it has so much more to do with the people that are functioning in that moment. It has everything to do with it.
My wife and I both do this work, and I think both of us got into this because we think maybe you can make a little bit of a difference.
Still photography does something that no other medium can do, and I do think it's simply because it freezes a moment. It stops time.
Every month, more than 35 million people read National Geographic magazine. We transport people. We're here to share a world that grows increasingly interesting and more complex every day. We give our photographers a great deal of creative freedom, and they reward us in return.